You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramat B'Shem Israel 5780, 2020. This week's Parsha is Parsha's Savo. And in our Parsha, we have the Teichacha, we have the Torah's warning as to what will happen if we, heaven forbid, do not follow its dictates, do not follow in its ways, and if we act in a way which is not appropriate, so Hashem responds in kind. After the discussion of the Teichacha, I want to read to you what the verses say here. So the Torah finishes off and says that this is the covenant, this is the deal. You want to be a unique, special people, you want to have this relationship with Hashem that lasts for all eternity, for all time. So it involves a commitment, it involves, there are responsibilities. And if those responsibilities are not kept, so then there are negative results. Immediately following that, the Torah tells us like this, and this is where I'm going to focus. Vayikra Moshe el kol Yisrael. Moshe called out. Listen to this language. Moshe called out to all of the people of Israel. Vayomer aleim, and he says to them, Atem re'isem es kol asher asa Hashem le'nechem be'eretz Mitzrayim l'far l'chol avadav u'l'chol artza. He says, you, the Jewish people, saw all that Hashem did to the people of Egypt, to Pharaoh, all of his land, etc. All the awesome miracles that Hashem did, you guys saw it yourself. It wasn't that long ago. It was only 40 years ago. Many of the people who were alive at that time had seen it themselves. It says something, says Moshe Rabbeinu, that we didn't understand. We didn't have a full conception. We didn't completely internalize perhaps what we saw. He tells them that you were traveling, Hashem has led you, or it's Moshe Rabbeinu saying, I have led you for 40 years in the Midbar. Amazing miracles. Your clothes didn't wear out. Your shoes didn't wear out. And as the Midrash says, the shoes actually grew. The clothes actually grew with the person. Hashem speaking through the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu says, I had indeed given you bread. You didn't have regular bread. You didn't have wine and other intoxicating drinks. The point here is that you need to know, you need to contemplate and think about the miracles that I've performed for you throughout the time, whether it was in bringing you out of Egypt, or whether it was in the time that now you have seen the last 40 years throughout our stay in the wilderness. This is an interesting thing. I don't know how much I'm going to speak about the contrast between the fact that before this, the Torah is talking about the fact that there's a covenant, there are repercussions for negative behavior, and then we have a statement, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Moshe Rabbeinu calls out to the Jewish people and says to them, in the name of Hashem, look at the miracles, look at the awesome miracles in your life. Perhaps you could say, Al derech hapshat, simple understanding, that Hashem wants us to know, don't just notice all the negative things that I'm saying. It sounds like a tough statement. Hashem is saying all these tough things if you don't do what you're supposed to do. So there's going to be repercussions for it. Look at the miracles. Don't focus on the negative. Focus on the positive. Focus on the fact that I've given to you and I've helped you out in a miraculous way, unusual way. But I'd like to share with you something amazing from the Midrash, and there's just really cool things going on here, and let's see what we can take for ourselves. Vayikra Moshe el kol Yisrael. The pasuk says that Moses called to all of the people of Israel. Now, the Midrash says a few things which seem to be unconnected, unrelated, but I believe that they are, as it's its way. Whenever we learn a Midrash, so there's a chidah, there's a challenge. What is the Midrash saying? How do the different parts of the Midrash relate to each other? What is the crux of the message of the Midrash? Let's see. Halacha Adam Yisrael she'amad lekros b'Torah. The halacha is that a person gets an aliyah, he's called to the Torah. So can he read? Right? It says Vayikra Moshe. I think that this is the pshat in the Midrash. It says Vayikra Moshe el kol Yisrael. He called out. When we read, it's also called kriah satar. We call out. There's a reading. There's a calling out. So when we when the Torah is speaking to us, so to speak, when we get an aliyah, it means that there's something here in the Torah that speaks to us. You can't read less than 3 psukim. If you want to get a message from the Torah, you have to read at least 3 psukim. You can't have less. Can you get Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yakov in explaining the idea, why is it that you can't read less than 3 psukim? So our sages explained that, number one, first idea, it's Keneged Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's a certain completion, there's a certain, call it a partzuf, a face, a whole concept, which Avram represents Chesed, Yitzchak represents Gevura, Yaakov is Tiferes. You have these 3 aspects coming together. If you want to have a completion, if you want to have a complete message for you from the Torah, you need 3 psukim, you need 3 verses. Davar acher, another explanation, Keneged Moshe, Aharon and Miriam shenina Torah al Yedeim. It corresponds to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. These 3, the Geula team, as I like to refer to them, the Geula team, the Torah team, who brought, as the Midrash says very interestingly, including Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam in the Torah team. The Torah came through them. Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. Okay, that needs more explanation, but we're not going to have a chance to talk about that this time. But I want to understand, the point that I want to understand is the Midrash talks about Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yakov, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. What is the idea here that the 3 psukim that we read are corresponding to these 3 individuals? This team, the team of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, or the team of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yakov. What is the concept? We're going to come back to answer that question at the end. Davar acher, Keneged Moshe, I'm sorry, I read that. Amar Rav Hoshaya. Rav Hoshaya brings us to seemingly a different place. So the Mahar Zu, in explaining this Midrash, tells us that there's another pasuk which we're referring to here in the Midrash, where the verse uses the same lashon. It's back in Dvarim, Perek Hey pasuk Aleph. It says, "Vayikra Moshe el kol Yisrael." Moses calls out to all of Israel. Same lashon as in our pasuk in our parsha. Moshe calls out to all the people of Israel. He goes through the fact that the Jewish people he reminds them of their experience. Here he's reminding them of the experience of the miracles that they experienced in the Exodus from Egypt and throughout the 40-year sojourn in the wilderness. In the beginning of Devarim in Perek Hey, in chapter 5, verse 1, Moshe Rabbeinu reminds them of their experience at Har Sinai, the awesome miraculous experience where Hashem's revelation occurred. He revealed himself to the entire Jewish people, over 1 million strong, perhaps much more than that. And he reminds them of that, okay? So here the Midrash says, very interesting. Even the lowest person in the entire Klal Yisrael, had a greater vision, had a greater experience of Hashem's revelation than Ezekiel, who is one of the greatest of the prophets. The verse tells us that Hashem spoke face to face with the Jewish people. Each and every one of them saw. Face to face did Hashem speak to you. And where does Rav Hoshaya see this? Where does he see that maybe it's just all of Klal Yisrael? How do you know it's every individual? So it seems to me, based on having read the Midrash a few times to understand it, Vayikra Moshe el Kol Yisrael, as we'll see in the Hemshech, in the continuation of the Midrash, there's a pinpoint here of Kol Yisrael. Every single one of the Jewish people was important. You couldn't have had that revelation without everyone being there, as we're about to see. Kol Yisrael, even the lowliest person amongst Am Yisrael, the person you would think, who's that person? The street sweeper, whatever, the person that we don't give a proper chashivas to. We don't really appreciate who they are. We don't really appreciate their place. Even that person had the highest revelation, higher than Ezekiel, who was one of the kings of the prophets. Okay. Well, again, what is the idea here? What is the concept? What is the Midrash coming to teach us? Very powerful. You know how you Yisrael Chaser Afilu Adam Echad Lo Hoisa Shechina Niglas. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says an awesome thing. He says such a powerful thing. He says if there was one Jew missing from Har Sinai, if one of the Jews wasn't standing around there, maybe he had to use the bathroom, or maybe he fell asleep, one person missing, one child, one baby, Hashem would not have revealed himself to the Jewish people. How do I know? Hashem came down on Mount Sinai and he revealed himself to the entire Jewish people. Kol ha'am. I need every single one. I need every single one to be here, Hashem says. In order for me to reveal myself, I can't do it if anyone is missing. Awesome. Unbelievable thing. Unbelievable thing. Yes, every single one of us is so important. From the greatest person to the least important person, seemingly least important person. There was a story with Rebbe Yehuda Anasi. He was giving a drasha in the great synagogue, in the great Beis Midrash. Actually, he said, wait, I'm waiting until every single person is in. I'm not starting before everyone is here. Where did he get this idea from? Rebbe learned this idea from Matan Torah, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu did things. What did Hashem do? Hashem said, I'm not giving the Torah until everyone is here. Hashem says, and this is a pasuk in Devarim, the beginning of Devarim, Perek Daled, pasuk Yud. Hashem said, I want you to gather together the entire nation. I can't speak until everyone is here. Every single person is important. This revelation isn't, it seems like it's a revelation to an entire nation. It's not. It's a revelation to every single individual. As we saw before, even the lowliest person had an awesome experience, the highest experience. Every single person has to hear this. What's the pshat? Like, what is the idea here? What is the Midrash coming to teach us? And how does it connect to the previous part of the Midrash? With a number of psukim that a person has to read. What's the idea? So here, at the very end of the Midrash, of course, the Midrash gives us the hint, which ties together all of the pieces of the Midrash and gives us an amazing understanding. I'm sorry, I need to check where we're up to here time-wise. Okay, great. So the idea here is like this. Says the Midrash, Rabban and Amri, the sages say, we find that when Hashem gave the Torah to Moshe, Hashem calls out to him. Hashem says, Moshe, come. Minayin. Hashem called out to Moses from the top of the mountain, and Moshe came up. Af. In the same way, Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe comes to teach the Torah to Klal Yisrael, here in our Parsha, right here, throughout the Torah, I don't know how many places it uses this language. Moshe calls to Klal Yisrael. Just like when Hashem wanted to give me the Torah, He did so by calling to me, so too Moshe Rabbeinu says, I call to you. Minayin. How do we know this? Pasuk says in our Parsha, and it says it back in the 5th chapter of Devarim. We're now in the 29th chapter. In both places it says Vayikra, He calls to them. He calls to them. Just like Hashem called to me, I call to you. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu says. What does the Midrash mean? What is the idea here? What is the idea of calling? What does it mean that Moshe calls to Klal Yisrael? What does it mean Hashem calls to Moshe Rabbeinu? And what does that have to do with kriah Torah, calling, reading from the Torah, calling? What is the idea of calling? What is the idea of calling? What is the idea of the word calling in English? A person has a calling. I think that's the answer. The answer is an amazing, amazing thing. Unbelievable thing. So powerful, so important, so deep, so important, and so shaykh to each and every one of us. And also shaykh to the time of Elul, heading into Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Aser Simei Tshuva. The call of the shofar calls. The Midrash, I believe, is saying a profound insight, a profound depth. And that is, Hashem calls to Moshe from where? Vayikra Hashem LaMoshe El Rosh Har. So I mistranslated. I said Hashem called from the top of the mountain. That's not what it says. It says, Vayikra Hashem leMoshe el Rosh Har. He called Moshe to the top of the mountain. Vayal Moshe goes up. Wow. Unbelievable. Hashem calls him to the top of the mountain. Moshe Rabbeinu is on the bottom of the mountain. Hashem is up at the top, as it were. Hashem calls him to the top of the mountain. Hashem says, I know where you are. And you feel like you're so far away. I know where you are. I'm calling you to the top of the mountain. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, I know where you are. I know you think you're very far. The Torah, what does that Torah have to do with me? It's like these very high plateaus, I have to reach up to be such a high person. I don't know if I'm such a high person. I don't know if I have the potential to be so great. Vayikra Moshe El Kol Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu calls out to every Jew, every Israelite. Yisrael is the highest part of a person. Yisrael is when Klal Yisrael is Osim Ritzonei Shel, when we do Hashem's will. That's when we're called Yisrael. Yisrael means that we are raised up. A sar is a prince. We are raised up like princes to be godly. That's what Yisrael is. Moshe Rabbeinu calls out to Klal Yisrael and says, you can be great. You can be awesome. Come here. I'm calling to you, and I call to you, so I'm calling from far away. And I'm saying, come to where I am. That's what Vayikra means. Now listen to this, because this is like now the whole entire Midrash becomes so delicious, so sweet, so beautiful. And the Midrash is saying like this. First of all, let's go backwards in the Midrash. Let's go backwards in the Midrash, because it's so important to understand this. The Midrash says, as we understand at the very end, the Midrash says to us, the Torah is calling to us. Hashem calls to Moshe, Moshe calls to us and says, come up to the top of the mountain. Mi aleh b'har Hashem. Call Yisrael, every single one. Don't think that you're not able to climb the mountain. Don't think that this doesn't speak to you. I can't start my speech until every person is here, Rebbe said. Why? Because I learned it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's so beautiful. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu learns from Hashem. Hashem calls down to him to where he is and says, come up. He says, wow, I can get there. Moshe says, Klal Yisrael, you can come here also. You can also come here. And Hashem, and Hashem says, here, I'm at the top of the mountain. I'm so far away. I'm not so far away. Vayikra, I'm calling to you. You can hear me from here. If you can hear me from here, that means that you belong here. And I'm not going to talk until you're all here, says Hashem. Every single person has the potential to climb to the top of the mountain. And that's also the pshat in the top, in the Midrash before. That each and every one, even the person who thought they were so low, the street sweeper, the custodian, I don't know, I don't want to speak negatively. Every person is important. Every job is important. Klal Yisrael needs every person. We need the street sweepers. Every person, doesn't matter how low you think you are, you have the potential to see the highest revelation. The king of the Nevi'im, Yechezkel HaNavi, saw the Kisei HaKavod, saw the holy throne. The lowest person at Har Sinai could see the highest thing. Every single one. If we're all there, we can all see. That's what the Midrash is saying. And the Midrash is saying that it's shaykh to each and every one of us. But how do we get there? And that's the first part of the Midrash, I believe. You need 3 psukim. The Torah has to call to you. If I don't read 3 psukim, the Torah hasn't called to me yet. And what are these 3 psukim keneged? Corresponding to whom? They correspond to Moshe, Aharon, Miriam, the highest of the high. The ones who brought the Torah down. Me? What do I have to do with them? Avraham, Yitzchak and Yakov. The Avis Ha'olam, the Harim, the parents of Klal Yisrael, the Harim, the mountains of Klal Yisrael. They're so high. They're beyond. We can't relate to who they were. No. When you hear the Torah, the Midrash is telling you, when you hear the Torah, you got to read 3 psukim, because you got to remember, you can be as great as them. Obviously, based on who you are and what your potential is, but the lowest person saw the highest vision. The lowest person has the ability to be as great as Avraham, as Yitzchak and Yakov. Every one of us can. Moshe, Aharon, Miriam, Nevi'im, the most awesome people that ever existed in history, the greatest Navi. Still, that person, every person must think, must believe. The Torah talks to me. The Torah calls to me where I am. The Torah calls to me where I am. That's what kriah Torah is. Kriah Torah means we read from the Torah, but that's not what kriah Torah means. Kriah Torah means the Torah calls to you, calls you to where it is, calls you to not read one pasuk, not read 2 psukim, read 3 psukim, get a chunk of the Torah. And I want to say, it's not in the Farish and the Midrash, but I believe that it's implied by the Midrash, that there's another aspect here that the Midrash is implying. Because it's talking about certain psukim, it's talking about Vayikra Moshe Kol Yisrael. He calls to them, and what does he say to them? He gives them the key. How do I get there? How do I get to, you're calling to me. How do I get up the mountain? How do I get to where you are? How do I get to where Moshe Rabbeinu, Aharon HaKohen, Miriam HaNeviah? How do I get to where they were? The answer is, notice the miracles. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hashem took care of you for 40 years. You didn't eat bread. You didn't drink any wine. There was nothing. You had no new clothes, and your clothes stayed. Unbelievable. Hashem has taken care of you the last 40 years. And not only that, back to Devarim Parak Hey, Hashem gave you the Torah. He called to you. He called to you, which means that he believes that you can get there. If Hashem is calling to you, he's performing miracles for you, you can get there. All you have to do is open your eyes to see. All you have to do is open your eyes and see that it's there, it's waiting for you, and then you can come up the mountain. And then you can hear the call. All that is waiting for you is to see the miracles and to see that Hashem called out to you. Every single one of our souls was there on Har Sinai. Each one of us had that experience. We don't remember, but it's embedded inside of us for all times. That's Vayikra Moshe El Kol Yisrael. Each and every one of us. We're coming to be Mamlech Hashem on Rosh Hashanah. It's Elul. It's a time of growth. The time of being honest and looking at ourselves. Us too hard. I can't be great. I do the same thing all the time. Be Mamlech Hashem. Make Hashem my king. He's really the one who I do whatever he says. Come on, I'm not being honest. No, the Torah is calling. You climb up the mountain. Moshe Rabbeinu climbs up the mountain and he brings down the Torah. We need to climb up the mountain and bring down the Torah to ourselves. We need to hear that the Torah is calling to us. We need to look and see the miracles that Hashem is performing for us, small miracles in our lives and sometimes big miracles every day. And we need to see that Hashem so much wants to give us this Torah. I want to bless you and I ask you to please bless me. Hashem should help us, that we should be zeich, we should merit to be able to hear the call of the Torah, to recognize that it's talking to all of the people of Israel, each and every one of us, even me. The Torah is talking even to me. We should recognize that and we should see the miracles Hashem is doing for us in our lives. We should hear that he's calling to us. Hashem should help us to be able to continue to climb the mountain. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos. This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.